Welcome to the deep dive. We're launching into something truly monumental today, thanks to the incredible sources you've brought us.
We are indeed.
We're taking a deep dive into Geoffrey Chaucer's The Canterbury Tales.
Yeah, and this isn't just, a collection of stories. It's really a window into a whole world, a foundational text, really, for English literature.
Written mostly between 1387 and 1400, right?
Exactly, primarily in that period.
And the setup is just brilliant, isn't it? This group of pilgrims, they're traveling from London to Canterbury.
To the shrine of St. Thomas Becket.
And just to pass the time, they decide, let's tell stories. Turns the whole trip into this lively contest.
It's a fantastic framing device, and it's often seen as Chaucer's greatest work, his magnum opus.
You can see why.
Yeah, and the sources really emphasize its huge impact, helping to sort of cement English as a literary language at a really crucial time.
So our mission today, using all this material you shared, is to kind of cut through the centuries, the complexities.
Find those core insights.
Exactly. Find the surprising bits, the key ideas that make it still feel so alive.
Okay, so let's start with maybe the first big thing the sources highlight. The work we actually have is, well, it's generally considered incomplete.
Right. That's quite surprising because when you look at the general prologue, Chaucer lays out this incredibly ambitious plan.
Oh, absolutely huge. He pictured around 30 pilgrims,
Okay.
and each one was supposed to tell 4 stories.
4. Wow.
Yeah, 2 heading to Canterbury, 2 on the way back.
So that would have been, what, 120 stories?
Roughly.
Yeah.
A massive undertaking. But what's actually survived is 24 tales,
Just 24.
which strongly suggests, that he just didn't finish it before he died.
And speaking of what survived, the actual physical text, the manuscripts, that's a whole journey in itself.
It really is. The sources point out we have an astonishing number of surviving manuscripts.
How many are we talking?
84 handwritten copies,
Yeah.
plus 4 in incunabula. Those are books printed really early, before 1500.
84 manuscripts. That's incredible for a text from that era. More than almost anything else in English, right? Except maybe Prick of Conscience.
Exactly. It shows how popular it was, even then. But because they were copied by hand, you get a lot of variation.
Little slips by the scribes, maybe?
Yeah, minor errors, definitely. But the sources also hint that some bigger differences might actually be Chaucer himself revising the text as it was being copied.
Tweaking it.
Perhaps. And here's a really key point for the sources. We don't have any copies in Chaucer's own handwriting. None at all.
So everything we have is at least one step removed.
Right. The 2 earliest and most important ones, Hengwart and Ellesmere, they were copied by the same scribe.
Oh, fascinating.
Right.
And the sources mention this idea, maybe a bit debated, about who that scribe was.
Yes, the name Adam Pinkhurst comes up. There's this intriguing, though not certain, possibility that Chaucer actually knew him personally.
Imagine that, Chaucer handing pages over to Adam.
It's a compelling thought.
Yeah.
And then, much later, you get William Caxton's edition in 1476.
The first time it was printed in England.
Exactly. So the text itself has this really layered history, copying, variation, maybe revisions, and then finally printing.
And all those variations, plus the fact that it's unfinished, must lead to this other huge question, the order of the stories.
Oh, absolutely.
How do scholars even try to figure out the intended sequence?
Well, that's where it gets really tangled, because there's just no final consensus. Scholars have to look for clues inside the text itself.
Like one character mentioning another's tale or talking directly to someone?
Precisely. Those little links. And based on those, they group the tales together.
Into what are often called fragments now. I think the sources mentioned 10, based on the Ellesmere manuscript.
That's the common way, yes. 10 fragments, largely following Ellesmere. And the tales within a fragment usually have clear links. You can see how they connect.
Okay.
But the connections between those fragments, that's much less obvious.
So that's why different old manuscripts might actually shuffle the order of those big chunks.
Exactly. It's like Chaucer gave us the chapters, perfectly linked within themselves, but maybe didn't leave a final table of contents.
So we're still piecing it together based on the internal logic and which manuscript seems to make the most sense overall.
That's a great way to put it. It shows how the material itself is a bit of a puzzle, and how the journey of the text shapes how we read it.
And understanding the text also means getting to grips with the language itself.
Ah.
Late Middle English from London, mostly.
Yeah, so London dialect. And as the sources make really clear, it sounds quite different from the English we speak today.
The big one seems to be that final E.
Definitely. It wasn't usually silent like it is for us. It often had its own sound, like a little
So a word like care would be more like Carew, something like Sickajair,
Exactly. That's the idea. It's quite striking when you hear it.
and other letters we don't pronounce now, like in night.
Right, the K and the E were sounded, so night would be more like nist, was the sort of breathy sound in the middle. And the vowels were very different too. This was before the Great Vowel Shift really changed things. A long E like in weeping? Weeping wouldn't be R-E, but more like the A in say, E-sis.
So hearing it read properly in Middle English must be a completely different experience.
Totally different. And the sources point out something really crucial about that final E we mentioned.
Oh yeah, what's that?
Well, early scribes, writing when that final sound was already fading out of spoken English, they weren't always consistent about writing it down.
So they'd leave it off sometimes, or maybe add it where it didn't belong.
Exactly. Which, for a long time, made Chaucer's writing look a bit grammatically inconsistent, maybe even clumsy.
But that wasn't the case.
No. Later scholars, really looking closely at his meter and his rhymes, realized he was actually incredibly precise. That final E often carried real grammatical weight.
Like telling you if an adjective was singular or plural, or different verb endings.
Yes, exactly, those kinds of distinctions. So, ironically, the variations in the manuscripts actually hid some of his skill for centuries.
That's fascinating how linguistic change messed with the perception of the text.
It really is.
So, thinking about all these different stories, where did Chaucer get the material? The sources say the frame idea of pilgrims telling tales seems pretty unique to him.
That specific frame, yes, pilgrims on pilgrimage, but he was definitely tapping into existing traditions. I mean, storytelling was the main entertainment back then.
Right.
And contests, where people performed and got judged, those are common. The sources mention something called the English Puy.
Like a poetry slam or singing contest?
Sort of, yeah. Competing for a prize, often a fancy dinner.
Which sounds a lot like the prize the host proposes in the tales, a free dinner for the best story.
Exactly. And then there's the big comparison, Boccaccio's Decameron.
Which also has a frame story, multiple narrators.
Definitely parallels there. Though remember, Boccaccio's storytellers are nobles sheltering from the plague, not pilgrims from different classes on the road.
Ah, okay. Different vibe.
And the sources point out that while there are overlaps, most individual Canterbury Tales actually have closer sources elsewhere. Chaucer probably read the Decameron, maybe on a trip to Italy.
But didn't necessarily have a copy sitting on his desk while writing.
Probably not. It seems more likely he drew on this huge mental library he had. The Bible, of course. Classical authors like Ovid.
And contemporary Italians. Petrarch, Dante. The sources suggest Chaucer might have been one of the first English writers to really engage with them.
Yes, that's a significant point. Plus, philosophers like Boethius, his friend John Gower's work, religious encyclopedias, even handbooks for preachers.
Wow, he read everything.
He was incredibly well read, but the real structural innovation, the sources argue, wasn't just the pilgrimage frame, but basing the whole collection around the characters doing the telling.
Instead of organizing by theme or moral lesson like older collections often did.
Precisely. And he signals this shift right away, doesn't he? After the knight, who represents the highest social rank, tells his very noble tale.
You'd expect someone else of high status, like the monk or the parson, to go next, following the hierarchy.
Right. But nope. In jumps the miller, who's from a much lower class, drunk, loud.
And he just insists on telling his story now.
That interruption is so important. It immediately blows up any expectation of a rigid, socially proper order.
The sources call it a clash between the ordered and the grotesque, like official culture versus the messy, popular reality.
That's a great way to put it. It sets the stage for the incredible variety of voices and styles you get throughout the work.
And speaking of style, Chaucer's range was just phenomenal, according to the sources. He could switch between different literary forms, different rhetorical techniques, seemingly effortlessly.
Yeah, he clearly knew his stuff.
Yeah.
He was familiar with the teachings of medieval rhetoric, ideas about high, middle, and low styles, maybe drawing on figures like Augustine.
And he tailors the style to the speaker, right? Even down to word choice.
Absolutely. A knight might talk about a lady, while a lower status character might say wench. Or a word like pity, could mean noble compassion in one story.
And maybe sexual desire or vulnerability in another.
Exactly. The meaning shifts with the context and the teller. But what's also interesting, as the sources note, is that even some lower-class tellers, like the nun's priest.
The one who tells the story about the rooster, Chanticleer.
That's the one. Even he uses incredibly sophisticated rhetorical devices. It shows that skill wasn't just limited to the nobility in Chaucer's view.
And the rhythm, the meter, it's mostly consistent.
Generally, yes. That five-stress line is pretty typical the ancestor of iambic pentameter.
Often in rhyming couplets. Writing rhyme, they called it.
Yes, that's it. Helps drive the story forward, though he usually manages to keep it from sounding too simplistic or sing-songy. And then for 4 of the tales, he uses a more complex stanza called rhyme royal.
7 lines, right, often for more serious stuff.
Exactly. It allows for a bit more reflection or formality.
So you've got this incredibly rich, varied tapestry of stories and styles, all being created against the backdrop of a really turbulent period in English history.
Absolutely. The late 14th century, when Chaucer was writing the tales, say, 1386 to 1400 was a time of major upheaval.
What kind of things were going on?
Well, the sources mention the Western Schism, where the church was divided with multiple popes. There was the Lollardy movement, questioning church authority and practices.
And real corruption, like with those pardoners selling indulgences. The sources mention specific incidents even.
Yes, documented corruption.
Yeah.
And socially, you had the aftermath of the huge peasants' revolt in 1381 still lingering.
Plus major political instability, right. Didn't King Richard II get deposed around then?
He did in 1399. It was a very unsettled time. The sources even note Chaucer himself moved out of London to Kent, perhaps partly to get away from some of the turmoil.
And the tales reflect all this change, even in small ways.
Yeah, like the sources point out, it's one of the first big English literary works to even mention paper.
Which was still relatively new then.
Compared to parchment, yes. It shows the changing material world.
And the characters themselves, people have tried to identify them with real historical figures, but the sources lean towards seeing them as types.
More as representative figures, yes. Chaucer seems to be creating these composites to offer a kind of subtle social commentary, a critique of his society through his different members.
Which brings us neatly into the big themes running through the work. Religion has to be number one, given the whole pilgrimage setting.
It's unavoidable. And the tales really capture the complex, sometimes contradictory attitudes towards the church in that era. Remember, this is after the Black Death, which had shaken a lot of people's faith in institutions.
And Chaucer definitely doesn't hold back on showing the bad side of the clergy.
Not at all. You've got the pardoner, who openly admits he's a fraud, selling fake relics and papal indulgences just to make money.
Shameless.
Completely. And the summoner, who works for the church courts but is totally corrupt, extorting people, taking bribes.
And there's that hint of a dodgy relationship with the pardoner, too. And in the Friar's Tale, he's literally shown consorting with a devil.
Yeah, it's pretty damning stuff.
But it's not all negative, right? There are other religious figures.
True. You have characters like the second nun, who seems to represent a more sincere, traditional ideal of monastic life. But then characters like the monk and the prioress.
They seem more interested in hunting and fine clothes and little dogs than spiritual devotion.
Exactly. They show how the ideal often clashed with reality, revealing a worldliness that perhaps wasn't quite fitting for their roles.
Now, there's one tale involving religion that the sources flag as particularly difficult, the prioress's tale.
Yes, that one requires careful handling. The tale recounts a story about Jews murdering a Christian choir boy who sings praises to Mary.
And the sources are very clear this is what's known as a blood libel against Jewish people.
Correct. It's a horrific anti-Semitic trope. And it's crucial to understand what the sources state here. This story wasn't invented by Chaucer.
It was already a well-known, hateful story circulating in the 14th century.
Yes, sadly, it was part of the prejudiced folklore of the time. Chaucer included a version of a story that was already out there. We're just reporting what the source material says about the tale and its historical context.
Okay, understood. Stepping back from individual tales, what about the pilgrimage itself? Canterbury was a huge destination.
Hugely popular. Becket's shrine was famous across Europe, associated with miracles and healing. So the journey itself carries a lot of weight.
And the sources suggest interpreting it symbolically.
Yes, as a kind of metaphor for the Christian life itself, this journey towards a heavenly goal, undertaken by flawed people who argue and sin, but are still striving together in a way.
Moving from the religious to the social, class is obviously huge in the tales. That structure of the three estates, clergy, nobility, commoners, seems central.
It is. The whole cast is drawn from across that social spectrum, and the interactions, the tensions, are often about class differences.
And you see specific class ideals explored, like chivalry with the knight and squire.
Right, that whole code of the warrior. Bravery, loyalty, courtesy, especially towards women.
But the sources suggest Chaucer shows the downsides too, like how it leads to violence and jousting, or even in The Knight's Tale itself.
Yeah, the Knight's Tale starts with this ideal of sworn brotherhood, but it descends into deadly rivalry over a woman they barely know.
So maybe a critique. The sources mentioned chivalry was kind of fading anyway by Chaucer's time.
There's certainly an argument for that.
Yeah.
And Chaucer's own tales that he tells as the narrator, the silly Sir Topas mocking chivalric romance, and the tale of Melibea arguing against vengeance, seem to push back against violence.
And we keep coming back to that Miller crashing the party after the night. That seems like the ultimate symbol of class clash.
It really is that moment of the grotesque, the unruly popular voice disrupting the ordered, the official noble hierarchy. It encapsulates so much.
All these different voices, different classes, different story types. It leads to another theme the sources discuss. This idea of relativism.
Yeah, because you get such radically different perspectives played side by side. A pious saint's life might be followed by a really bawdy, down-to-earth fablio.
One story emphasizes divine justice. The next is all about clever tricks and earthly desires.
Exactly. And the sources suggest that because there's such variety, the collection as a whole doesn't really land on one single truth or reality.
It just presents all these different ways of seeing the world.
Pretty much. Which maybe encourages the reader or listener to be more empathetic, or at least aware that reality looks different depending on who you are and what genre you're living in, so to speak.
That connects really well to another concept the sources bring up, liminality.
Ah, yes. Liminal space. That idea of being in between, on a threshold, in a state of transition.
Which the pilgrimage itself definitely is, right? You've left home, you're not at the shrine yet, you're literally on the road.
Exactly. It's a physical journey, but also potentially a space for spiritual or personal change.
Yeah.
A transitional zone.
And the sources quote someone, Jean Jost, describing the pilgrimage in the tales as, what was it?
A raucous and subversive liminal space, where rules get bent, the sacred mixes with the profane, danger and safety exist side by side.
That sounds spot on for the tales.
It really does. And you see liminality within the stories, too.
Like the Devil in the Friar's Tale, the one disguised as a yeoman.
Yeah, he's a figure crossing boundaries between the human world and hell. Or the Franklin's Tale, which is a Breton-like a genre often set in kind of magical borderland where the supernatural interacts with mortals. The past influences the present.
So the whole work is kind of playing in these in-between spaces.
Constantly exploring thresholds and transformations. It's a key part of its texture.
So this complex, unfinished, boundary-pushing work, how did people react to it back in the 14th and 15th centuries?
Well, who exactly Chaucer was writing for is debated. Courtly circles, maybe friends, perhaps a broader audience. But what's clear is that he was famous and respected in his own lifetime.
The sheer number of manuscripts suggests that, right? A medieval bestseller.
Kind of, yeah. Though the sources note the copies aren't usually as fancy or illustrated as, say, luxury religious books. But still, copied widely and quickly.
And early critics were fans.
Oh, big time. Poets who came right after him, like John Lydgate and Thomas Occleve, basically revered him. They saw him as the father of English poetry, the one who showed what the language could do.
Praising his skill, his wisdom.
Exactly. His sentence, the substance or meaning, and his rhetorical mastery, especially in tales like The Knights.
And that incompleteness we talked about, that actually spurred more writing.
It did. Several medieval writers tried their hand at finishing off the project. Someone wrote a continuation of the cook's unfinished tale. Someone else wrote a whole new tale, the tale of Baron, set on the Pilgrim's return journey. Lydgate even wrote The Siege of Thebes and presented it as the first tale told on the way back from Canterbury.
Wow, so other writers were literally adding to the collection.
Yeah, trying to fill the gaps.
Yeah.
And that impulse to engage with the tales just never stopped. The legacy is immense.
The sources list so many adaptations and works inspired by it over the centuries.
It's incredible, across every medium, really. Books using the structure historical fiction, science fiction like Dan Simmons' Hyperion, even nonfiction like Richard Dawkins using the pilgrimage frame for evolution in the ancestor's tale. Zadie Smith's recent play, The Wife of Willesden, based on The Wife of Bath.
And film and TV. Pasolini's famous film, the BBC adaptations, even that movie, A Knight's Tale, borrows Chaucer's name.
Right. And music, too. Sting naming an album 10 Summoner's Tales.
Plus visual art, like that mural in the Library of Congress. It just keeps echoing.
It really does. It's constantly being rediscovered and reinterpreted.
So to try and wrap up this deep dive, drawing on everything in these sources you brought, the Canterbury Tales is this, well, Extraordinary, complex, unfinished work.
A masterpiece, yeah. And it gives us this incredibly vivid snapshot of 14th century England, the society, the language, the literary styles.
Exploring these really timeless themes, faith, class, how we see reality, being in transition through this amazing, diverse group of people thrown together on a journey.
Absolutely. And digging into the material you shared, it really underscores just how much depth and richness is packed in there. It's like a whole world in one book.
It truly is, and it makes you think, given how Chaucer presented all those different perspectives, those clashing views of reality, and doing it during such a messy, turbulent time,
Yeah.
what does the fact that these stories still grab us today say about, well, about us, about that human need to connect, maybe to understand different viewpoints, or just to share a really good story, even when everything feels chaotic and divided? Maybe especially then, kind of like our own times, perhaps.
That's a really powerful thought to end on. It definitely makes you want to, pick up a good translation and jump back into that world yourself.
Exactly. See what stories resonate with you now.